My earliest memories are of balance drills, back straight, chin up, a book on my head and a tray of plastic teacups in my hands. My name is Daniela. I grew up in a small, fog-wrapped town in northern Slovenia. I'm 30 now, but I can still hear my mother's voice echoing through the hallway like a military command. Spine straight, heels tight. No daughter of mine will slouch like a tavern maid. Christina, my older sister, always got it right. She could glide across the room like a ghost, the book never sliding, the tray perfectly level. I, on the other hand, was always the clumsy one. My book tilted, my knees bent, and the teacups rattled like bones. Mother was a former ballet dancer, strict, tireless, and cold as marble. Every afternoon after school, she ran what she called our refinement routines. While other kids in our village rode bikes or watched cartoons, Christina and I practiced walking with grace, speaking in polite tones, and lowering ourselves into chairs without a sound. You are not little girls, she would say, lips pinched. You are future wives of dignity. Christina thrived in that world. She earned praise like it was currency. At 13, she embroidered lace gloves without a pattern. At 14, she could bake apricot scones with her eyes closed. On her 15th birthday, Mother gave her a custom-made sewing machine. She cried when she unwrapped it, not because it was beautiful, but because it meant she'd won. I pretended to be happy for her, but I remember feeling something bitter twist inside me that night. Me? I turned to books, real ones, physics, design, mathematics. I read late into the night by flashlight, hiding textbooks under my mattress. While Christina learned floral arrangements, I taught myself geometry. I told myself that if I couldn't win her love by being graceful, I'd win it by being brilliant. By 17, I had earned admission into one of the most competitive architecture programs in Vienna. I waited until after dinner to tell her, expecting, maybe stupidly, that she'd finally look at me the way she looked at Christina. Instead, she stared at the acceptance letter in her hands, her expression unreadable. Then she walked over to the fireplace and without a word tossed the letter in. I didn't move. I just stood there frozen as the paper curled and turned black. You think you're better than us? She said, her voice flat. All this talk of steel and glass in cities. You're running away from your blood. You are betraying your legacy. The next morning I didn't leave. I stayed, like a coward. That summer I started seeing Anton. He was the son of one of my mother's friends, quiet, brooding, and oddly protective. I didn't love him. But when he brought me to dinner, held doors, and complimented my mother's garden, she lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. For the first time in ages, she kissed my cheek before bed. So I stayed with him. Because for a little while I got to feel like the daughter she wanted, even if it meant becoming someone I barely recognized. For years later, I found myself standing on the familiar stone steps of my childhood home again. It was winter solstice, the biggest celebration of the year in our family, a strange mix of Slavic tradition and my mother's obsession with old-world etiquette. I hadn't been back since I left for Vienna the second time quietly with no goodbye. My mother never called. Neither did Christina. I probably wouldn't have come back now, but Marcus wanted to meet them. My fiancé. The kindest man I've ever known. He worked in child psychology and had the sort of face people trusted instantly. He believed families should try. I don't expect them to change, I had warned him on the drive. I just want you to be careful. He squeezed my hand on the steering wheel and smiled. Let's just get through dinner. Inside, everything looked the same. The wooden clock still ticked above the hearth. The dining room smelled of sweet wine and cloves. But Christina looked different. She was thinner than I remembered, pale, with a bruise half hidden under her makeup and a scarf tied around her wrist. I tried not to stare. Are you okay? I whispered when we hugged. She smiled too fast. I'm fine. Just clumsy, you know how I am. I looked over at her husband, Milan, standing stiff by the fire. His eyes didn't leave her for a second. My mother appeared then, dressed in forest green silk, her hair pinned back tight. Her expression didn't soften when she saw me, but she smiled when she looked at Marcus. I could already tell what she thought. Too soft, too gentle. Take her coat, Marcus said, helping me out of it. She's been promoted new lead on the Vasari complex. I shot him a warning glance, but it was too late. He was proud. Oh, my mother said, raising an eyebrow. A job and a fiancé. What a modern woman. Dinner started politely enough. We passed plates, toasted the season, even made it halfway through the stew. But then she reached for my hand, the one with the ring. Let me see this thing, she said, pulling it toward her. Big for such a modest girl. I tried to laugh it off. Marcus picked it. I love it. She didn't let go. Her fingers dug into mine. You love many things, don't you? Concrete. Power. The sound of your own voice. You think this is success? Christina shifted in her chair. Mama. But she stood up suddenly, yanking my hand. You were meant to carry on tradition. Modesty. Grace. Not flaunt yourself like a cheap. Let go, I hissed. She grabbed my wrist harder, trying to twist the ring off. You are not pure. You are not elegant. You are. Christina stood and pinned my arms down. Just let her take it, she whispered. Don't. Marcus shouted, coming around the table. My mother turned to him with a laugh so sharp it sounded like a cough. And this? This is who replaces your legacy? A man who cries over feelings. He pulled me free and backed away, shielding me with his body. I heard chairs scraping, cutlery clattering. I didn't know who called the police, maybe Marcus, maybe a neighbor. but when they arrived she still had my blood under her nails. I left that night with a split lip and a bandaged finger. And that was the last time I ever saw my mother's house from the inside. The morning after the solstice, I woke up in Marcus' apartment with my hand wrapped like a war wound and a voicemail from the local precinct confirming a formal incident report had been filed. I deleted the message without listening to the rest. I didn't go into work that week. I told the firm I had a family emergency, which wasn't a lie, just the kind of truth no one wants to hear out loud. Marcus helped me change all my passwords: phone, email, bank, even my apartment buzzer code. I blocked my mother, blocked Christina, blocked Milan. I didn't trust any of them. At the firm, I kept my head down. I wore long sleeves and avoided elevators. When people asked about the bandages, I mumbled something about a kitchen mishap. Only my boss, Margarethi, knew the real story. She was hard to read, late 50s, Viennese, terrifyingly elegant. But when I showed her the photos and the police statement, her jaw actually tightened. "You've done good work here," she said, flipping through the report. "But if this kind of disruption continues, it won't matter." I understood. The firm was climbing fast, building towers and bridges across 4 countries. They couldn't risk gossip. I promised her it was over. It wasn't. The first call came 3 days later. Margarethi summoned me to her office and played a voicemail over speaker. A woman's voice, cold and precise. "Hello, I just thought you should know, one of your junior architects, Daniela, has been stealing designs. She's unstable, possibly involved with some dangerous people. You should ask her about her boyfriend. Very controlling, very violent." She ended the message with a cheerful "God bless." Margarethi turned off the recording and looked at me like she was studying a lab sample. "Do you recognize the voice?" I didn't hesitate. "That's my mother." She nodded once. "Next time, we get it in writing." More followed. Emails, an anonymous tip accusing me of manipulating building permits. A letter mailed to the firm directly that accused Marcus of holding me under psychological duress. It was printed in all caps and signed, laughably, "A concerned citizen." I showed Margarethi everything. I brought in the police report from the dinner, the restraining order Marcus had helped me file. She accepted it all, but her patience thinned with every passing week. "I believe you," she said finally. "But I'm warning you, if this keeps bleeding into our work, you'll plateau here." I went home that night and cried in the bath, not because I was scared, because I realized I could win every argument, present every fact, and still lose everything I'd built. This wasn't about who was right. It was about the noise my family had become, and how much of my future they could still ruin from a distance. We knew it couldn't go on like this. Not with the voicemails, the letters, the sudden appearances near the office. Marcus' sister, Sabine, stepped in before we even had to ask. She was a corporate attorney, sharp as glass and more protective of her brother than anyone I'd ever met. "I'm treating this like a hostile entity," she said plainly, flipping open a leather-bound notebook across our dining table. "Your mother is no longer a relative. She's a pattern of behavior, and we're going to treat her accordingly." I nodded. My hands were cold despite the tea in front of me. We started gathering evidence. Phone call logs, screenshots of text messages and emails, timestamps from building security footage. Even the fake police wellness checks 2 in the same week became part of the file. Officers would show up at my door claiming they'd gotten a call that someone inside was screaming or crying. It was always anonymous, but I knew the voice that made those calls. I'd heard it echo through too many childhood bedrooms to forget. Then Christina joined in. It started with voicemails, slurred at first, then angrier, more focused. "This is what you wanted, right?" one said. "You wanted me to suffer." Milan left. "He says I'm hysterical. He says I'm just like her. And it's because of you." Another one 2 nights later. "You always thought you were better than me. He disciplined me and I needed it. You're soft. You let Marcus make you weak." Sabine listened to them all without expression. She scribbled notes, timecodes, transcriptions. She cross-referenced our files with local harassment laws, digital stalking statutes, restraining order precedents. We weren't just documenting anymore. We were building a case. "This isn't just emotional cruelty," she said. "It's a coordinated campaign to isolate and discredit you. The restraining order will help, but it's not enough." She filed for an injunction, then began drafting a civil harassment petition that detailed every event going back years: the indoctrination, the physical assault, the interference at work. She even noted that Christina's calls were evidence of collusion, not just personal dysfunction. "This needs to be treated like a legal firewall," she explained. "We're cutting off oxygen to their tactics. They want drama. They want access. We give them nothing." Still, the tension grew. I couldn't sleep without my phone on silent. I started taking a different route to work every morning. We had our building concierge alert us if anyone with my last name asked for entry. Even Marcus started keeping pepper spray in his coat pocket. We weren't panicking. We were preparing. Because every move they made now, every message, every voicemail, every sudden appearance, wasn't just abuse anymore. It was evidence. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to fight back. They found our wedding date. We hadn't announced it anywhere, not even to close friends. We planned a quiet courthouse ceremony with just a handful of witnesses. No flowers, no vows, no first dance, just peace. But someone in the family must have gone digging through civil records. Probably a cousin. Maybe even one of Christina's old friends who still owed mother some twisted sense of loyalty. We were in the middle of finalizing witness paperwork when the storm hit. The rumors started with anonymous emails sent to Marcus' clinic. Strange, disjointed messages. Do you know who you're marrying? And be wary of women who abandon their blood. Then came the bigger smears, posts on community boards, even LinkedIn comments. Accusations that I was part of a Viennese cult of spiritual feminism, that I'd engaged in illicit activity abroad, all wrapped in religious language, vague and venomous. Then the real blow. Margarethi called me into her office. She didn't even look angry, just tired. There's been chatter, she said, placing her glasses on the table. Whispers. Clients asking why your name's been connected to unusual stories. I didn't speak. What was I supposed to say? That my mother had fabricated a public relations nightmare because I wouldn't sit quietly in her house anymore? I'm putting your promotion on hold, she said. Not because I don't believe you, but because leadership roles come with scrutiny. And right now that scrutiny would bury you. I nodded once tightly. I didn't cry until I got home. The courthouse ceremony was still on. We told ourselves we wouldn't cancel. It would be quiet. A friend of Marcus offered to officiate. Sabine would be our witness. 2 friends from the firm would join. But even that was too much peace. The morning of the wedding, as we walked into the registry office, they were already waiting. My mother, Christina, and a man I had never seen before wearing a long black coat and holding what looked like a leather-bound Bible. She still has time, Mother announced loudly in the lobby. She can be forgiven. Christina stood stiff beside her, eyes rimmed red. Her hair was chopped shorter now. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. The man stepped forward, hands raised like a street preacher. This is not marriage, he said calmly. This is rebellion. You are unclean, but the Lord delivers all who kneel. Marcus stood in front of me, but I wasn't afraid. I was humiliated. Security came fast. Sabine showed them the restraining order. They were escorted out without struggle, my mother shouting about redemption the whole time. I'll never forget the way she screamed Marcus' name, like it was venom in her mouth. The whole building heard it. Afterward, the clerk who married us apologized 3 times. But strangely, that chaos turned out to be a gift. With the public disruption and new footage, Sabine finally had enough to push the legal order through. Within 48 hours, we had a reinforced restraining order. A decade-long protection post-release. Full legal acknowledgement of repeated harassment. But it came at a cost. Word spread through the firm. Quiet looks in the hallway. Projects reassigned. And Margarethi? She never said it aloud, but I could feel it. My name had become complicated. I was finally safe, but I wasn't untouched. The restraining order should have been the end. But my mother always knew how to use other people's hands to do her dirty work. 3 weeks after the wedding incident, we noticed a man outside the grocery store. Not unusual, until we saw him again outside the clinic where Marcus worked. Then again outside our apartment building, standing by the bike rack, pretending to check his phone. Always watching, never speaking. First, we thought it was a coincidence. Vienna's a small city in some ways, but after the 3rd sighting in a week, Marcus followed him discreetly, just for a block. That night, Christina left me a voicemail. You'll notice my boyfriend soon, she said, her voice bitter. He just wants to make sure you're safe, that you're not hurting anyone else. That was the moment I realized we were dealing with more than just harassment. This was surveillance, quiet invasion. Sabine filed to have the restraining order extended to include Christina and her new partner, but it was slow going. The courts had already granted what they called generous boundaries. They didn't see the man outside the bakery. They didn't hear the way the intercom buzzed twice at 3 a.m., then fell silent. We started taking side streets to work. Marcus moved his private sessions online. I carried pepper spray in my coat. My boss assigned me to more internal design roles. No client-facing meetings, no travel. Then came the email. A job application sent in my name with my real credentials to an adult entertainment agency. The subject line read, experienced and uninhibited, looking for work. They'd used my firm's address. Sabine tracked the submission to an IP address registered to an apartment 2 floors below my mother's. She submitted the evidence, and this time the court responded. We were granted a new layer of protection, an order for malicious impersonation and stalking, with criminal charges pending. But the damage was already done. The worst came during a live presentation. We were pitching a sustainable housing complex to a major investor. It was my first in-person presentation since the wedding. I stood at the podium, walking through energy models and recycled materials, when the doors to the conference room burst open. She was there. My mother, thin, wild-eyed, somehow having slipped past the front desk. She pointed straight at me and shouted, "This woman is unclean. She's part of a cult. You people are being lied to." For 3 whole seconds no one moved. Then Marcus, who had been seated in the back, stood, grabbed her shoulder and called security. She screamed scripture as they dragged her out, kicking her heels against the tile floor. We lost the client. I was pulled from all pending contracts. Margarethi told me kindly, almost gently, that she needed to move me to the background until things settle. I knew what that meant. Christina sent me another voicemail the next day. She warned you, she said. This could have been avoided if you just stopped pushing. You think the world bends for women like you, but it doesn't. It punishes them. I didn't reply. I just forwarded it to Sabine and filed it under evidence. Christina's real name was Elena Christina Mirik, but our mother always insisted on calling her Christina, said it sounded more refined, more continental. I used to think Christina agreed. She wore that name like a badge of loyalty. But by the time the court hearings began, something had cracked. It started with her posture. She didn't walk into the courtroom like the woman I remembered, the one who floated through our house in handmade skirts and iron sleeves. She shuffled in quietly, eyes down, her coat too big. She sat at the far end of the bench behind my mother, like she didn't want to be seen too clearly. When Sabine cross-examined her, she barely looked up. Sabine asked her to confirm that she had left me threatening voicemails. Christina nodded once. Why? Sabine asked. There was a pause so long the clerk looked up from her notes. Then Christina said softly, because I thought if I didn't, she'd come for me next. Your mother. Christina's mouth opened, then closed. Yes, she whispered. She told me it was my job to remind Daniela who she really was, that the family depended on it, that if I didn't, I was betraying everything she raised us to be. The courtroom was dead silent. Sabine let it hang for a beat. Then she moved on. I didn't cry during the trial, but I think that was the moment I started breathing again. 2 weeks after the verdict, the one that extended the restraining order and added criminal charges for impersonation, stalking, and defamation, I got a text from Christina. It just said, I left him. I don't know where to go. Marcus looked at me when I read it aloud. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He just went to the guest room and started changing the sheets. She arrived the next morning with a cracked phone and 2 grocery bags of clothes. Her wrist was bruised, faint, and yellowing. Her voice was low, like everything she said was a confession. I didn't believe her for the longest time, she told me. I thought she was the standard. And you were the cautionary tale. The one who disobeyed. I made tea. She sat on our couch like a woman on borrowed furniture. I stayed with Milan because he reminded me of her. Every rule, every punishment, every moment I felt small, it felt familiar. I nodded. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't need to. She stayed 3 weeks. Marcus was gentle with her. He made her laugh once and I saw something flicker in her face, something light and confused, like she'd forgotten joy was allowed. When she left for a women's shelter that helped domestic survivors transition into housing and education, I gave her my old laptop. She started taking online classes. We didn't hug. We didn't say anything dramatic. But before she walked out the door, she turned and said, you weren't the cautionary tale. You were the escape plan. And that was the first time I saw her as something separate from mother. Something maybe worth saving. The house was quiet when I came home. I remember that. Marcus was working late. Christina had moved into her new apartment a week earlier. I was alone, the first real silence in months. I noticed the smell first. The faint scent of lavender and something sharper. Antiseptic? Vinegar? No, nail polish remover. The kind our mother used to soak her hands in when she did her own manicures. I hadn't smelled that in years. The door wasn't broken, but it was unlocked. The kitchen light was on. I stepped in slowly, my heart pounding before my mind could catch up. Then I saw it. My closet pulled open, clothing slashed with scissors, suits shredded, blouses torn at the sleeves, my wedding shoes crushed under the heel of a boot I didn't recognize. There were words written on the mirror in lipstick. Read, you are not clean. God sees everything. Judgment comes for daughters who defy their mothers. I backed out of the room dizzy. My voice didn't work at first, but when it did, I called Marcus. Then the police. They found fingerprints. She had used the spare key, one from an old lockbox I'd forgotten about, left in the basement of our childhood home. The locksmith told us it was easy to copy. Common design, he said. Anyone could have had it made. But it wasn't anyone. It was her. She'd waited until the courts were busy with motions, until Christina had distanced herself, until she thought she could break in, destroy something intimate, and walk away before anyone noticed. But this time she left a trail. There was surveillance footage, witnesses from the building. Her face, clear as day, looking up into the security camera at the front entrance. The arrest happened the next afternoon. Sabine called us from the courthouse. They charged her with breaking and entering, destruction of property, and violation of a protective order, she said. That's enough to put her away. This time it sticks. The trial was short. She didn't even try to deny it. Just sat in her chair, jaw clenched, as the judge read the charges. Christina testified again. Her voice was stronger this time. She brought photos of the bruises from her last year with Milan. She spoke about the way our mother used religion like a leash. She taught us that obedience was purity, she said. That silence was safety. I took the stand too. Told the court about the lipstick messages, the destroyed suits, the years of sabotage. When the verdict came down, 3 years in prison with a decade-long no-contact order upon release, I didn't feel joy. Not exactly. Just relief. Christina sat beside me as the sentence was read. She didn't cry, but I saw her hand tremble on her lap. I reached over and held it. She didn't pull away. Outside the courthouse, Marcus was waiting with tea in a thermos and warm scarves for both of us. It was early winter again, just like the night of the solstice. As we walked down the steps, Christina whispered, "She'll come back." Maybe, I said, but not the same way. Not to this life. She nodded, and for the first time I saw her shoulders settle, not with defeat, but with a quiet kind of peace. Not the kind you inherit, the kind you build.